Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania. Rocket is the key fintech hub in Rocket is the key fintech hub in Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania, where top creators and founders build the future of financial technologies. Rocket is the key fintech Rocket is the key fintech hub in Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania.
So hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, we have some issues with our video, but at least there's one thing you will remember for the future, that we are at Rocket. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a huge pleasure to welcome you to our La Grande event of the year, Fintech Trends. What's next for 2021, powered and presented to you by Rocket. Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania, where top creators and founders build the future of financial technologies and the next generation of sustainable innovations. Fintech Trends event is one of the key events at Rocket, very famous in the ecosystem as well. We always invite top industry experts to discuss the future insights. With each passing day, we are encountering a radical change in the fintech industry. We all know that 2020 has been a total paradigm shift year for the fintech world. Not only mention the rest of the world, of course, but it's time to look further. Where should we be watching, and what will impact anything that involves money in 2021? From open banking, AML to AI innovations, which spheres will prosper in 2021? What are the top predictions and trends? Today, we have an exceptional chance to gather such an amazing crowd of panelists from all around the globe. Allow me to present each and every one. Anders Norlin, CEO and board member at Fintech. Hello, Anders.
Yes, good afternoon. Happy to be here.
It was last year, right? Hashtag unmute yourself. Amazing.
Yes.
Also, we are very glad to have Ruta Merkevičiūtė, Head of Division, Payments and Market Supervision at the Bank of Lithuania. Hello, Ruta.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. Also, Sharon Kimati, Editor at Fintech Futures. Hello, Sharon.
Hey, happy to be here.
And last but not least, Gerrit Sinderman, General Manager, Country Success Lead Switzerland at F10 Fintech Incubator and Accelerator.
Thanks a lot, Andreas. Happy to be here.
And I'm Andreas Milnavicius, founding member and BDO at Baltic Sandbox. I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's event. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to see such bright faces. It's still daytime everywhere, so at least we don't have to force someone to stay here and not to sleep. And I really hope to have a very interesting discussion with you here. Allow me to start. Each year, we celebrate the explosive, pardon my French, of course, growth in Lithuanian fintech. There are so much numbers to support our happiness here in Lithuania. For example, last year we had 230 fintech companies operating in Lithuania. Lithuania had the largest fintech hub in the EU in terms of licensed companies. Being a country of only 3 million people, Sharon, that's only a third of London population, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, roughly.
We have more than 4,000 experts in the fintech sector, and seriously, Brexit just came into effect this year, and we can't be more happy this year. See that it's only being at least I sometimes feel that we're locked in a bubble. Allow me to ask a pretty direct questions to you all, except Ruta, of course. How do you, fellow panelists, see the global fintech world today? Do you actually see Lithuania on the map? And maybe we are just overreacting slightly. Gerrit, maybe we can start with you.
No, I have to say I'm a big fan. I mean, I've seen like not only from Lithuania but in general, like from the Baltic states, quite early on, quite some top talent, and I think has been always inspiring. And I think a lot of European countries have been learning.
Okay, understood. Anders, something to add from your side?
Yeah, we've been tapping into most of the organization in Lithuania, and as I see it, or we see it, you have like a heaven for starting up a fintech, considering the support from the state, the government, and to the regulations, the process itself. So a bit jealous, but it's also to tap in and learning what you're doing, of course. So I'm eager to know more what's happening in Lithuania.
Well, I can definitely send you the Fintech report that was just released last week. And another interesting thing, every time actually I meet some journalists at the events of Fintech-oriented events, I usually say, like, imagine a country where if you have any questions for the let's call the main regulator, the Bank of Lithuania in this case, you can actually invite representatives from the bank to have a meeting in the local coffee shop, and they're okay with that. Imagine this happening in some, for example, Paris in France. I think I'm living in the most awesome country in the world. Okay, I'm stopping with bragging. Sharon, what is your take on Lithuania? And since you are talking with us today from London, what are the feelings towards us?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this government currently is looking for opportunities, of course, especially after Brexit, as you mentioned earlier on. So, yeah, there's a lot of room for collaboration and growth. I know in a few days here in the UK, they're announcing their budget as well. And a lot of it does look like they want to grow their talent and attract talent as well. There's been quite a few people who have since left, unfortunately, in London. And I think there's a way for them to be attracted back too. I know that they are looking at a fast-track visa scheme as well, which was announced just a few days ago. So yeah, I think it's essentially open for opportunities and also partnerships as well along the line. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty much room for growth is what I would say.
Thank you so much. And Ruta, I don't think we have to actually feel like we're the only wolves in the village or in the forest. You, as a representative of the Bank of Lithuania, when we are actually doing pretty good in terms of the PR and the growth of the fintech, do you often get contacted from the various other countries and especially from their banks?
It depends if you were telling about central banks. So
yes, absolutely.
So when we were like 4 years ago, the little country without any kind of fintech hub initiative here. So of course, nobody were interested to us. Now we are really feeling that we are a game changer. Lithuania itself, more and more competent authorities for biggest countries in Europe are really contacting us. And what is very interesting that some bigger countries are really wanting to learn some experience from us, because by attracting the companies, by attracting fintech, we feel that we have to learn ourselves. So Andres, and you said that about accessibility. So accessibility is not only to be partner with companies, but for us and also to understand the risk, the challenges, and how we could improve.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. Understand me, I don't want to be the super positive guy today, and let's move on to a bit more difficult maybe questions. But on the other hand, thanks to the year 2020, or thank you to that guy that improvised during the evening dinner with a rather exotic animal, who could ever imagine that it's gonna be so easy to have an international panel comfortably sitting in the places we want to be today, right? Moreover, the overall tolerance towards the technology really skyrocketed. Even our grandmas learned how to control our weekends with all those video calls, those constant video calls that they then finally learn how to do. Briefly, what's your take on the position of fintech today? Let's leave last year behind us and make a wider question. How did the financial sector actually survive the turbulence that touched down everywhere? Are we stronger today? Are we in a better position today? We do see the reports from the e-commerce companies that everyone skyrocketed. And you know, if we speak about those businesses that moved online or actually embraced the digitalization, they couldn't do anything without the fintech help, right? Gerrit, maybe we can start with you. So what's your take? Where is the fintech now today? Is it stronger or weaker?
I would say it's a mixed picture. For me, I think like last year was very good for triggering, but of course, I mean, it was a bit still too short for shaping. I think there's definitely now a much higher sense of urgency among the banks and other financial service providers. So everyone or a lot of them have been caught like with dropped pants, like when the crisis hit, and I think therefore there is a higher urgency. However, on the other side, of course, there have been like also a few overlaying facts that, okay, just working remote is not necessarily like the best situation. Like if you want to get into the door of a risk-averse organization as a young tech company. So I would say part of the potential that could have been lifted in the crisis was probably like also at the same time a bit slowed down. And so now it's really like 2021, hopefully to see like how much of this momentum will be kept once everyone has a vaccine. So still positive, and I think like some topics definitely have been significantly accelerated.
Sharon, what do people actually speak in the fintech futures? Maybe you have a bit different approach towards this question.
Well, I'd say there's been both good and bad that have come about from last year. The good is that with the shift, as you mentioned, to digitalization, the thing with that was that people can now utilize things whilst they're at the comfort of their homes, like we're doing today. But then the bad side with that is that quite a lot of these banks were not fully prepared at the right time. So there were a few crashes in the first instance, in the first lockdown as well. And there were cyber attacks as well that were on the rise, especially because with cyber attackers, they tend to be more sophisticated as well as time goes on. So then the people who are trying to hold the fort end up playing catch up with how sophisticated the attacks can end up being. But other than that, at least it's moved the conversation, especially within banking technology, to actually drive change, especially with some of these legacy core banking players. So we are starting to see a shift towards, I guess, using more third parties as well. So there's a rise of core banking providers and also new players in the market. So there's, the likes of 10 Times who have come about in the UK as well, who are offering these services. Aside from that, there's also a rise in embedded finance, as we've seen, mainly because, with the rise of e-commerce, a lot of these other outlets are starting to think, well, how can we potentially merge these offerings into a financial offering as well? So the likes of Rails Bank, for example, or Solaris Bank, offering banking as a service has been like a super hot topic from last year because of the rise thereof of e-commerce. But then with the downside, there's also shutdowns. So there've been, a lot of branch closures that we've seen both in the UK and the US. There's been a lot of job losses as well that comes with that too. So yeah, there's been both good and bad, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, we can probably go into the nitty-gritty of which ones have survived. I mean, there have been a lot of neobanks that have died last year and even beginning of this year too. So it is proving to be quite tough for some players trying to overcome this pandemic.
Thank you so much. Anders, anything to add? Or maybe, well, when I was asking this question, I was really actually hoping everyone to be super positive towards what is happening today. And thank you so much. Okay. I forgot a few things, of course. So Anders, what is your position in this question?
I think it's super positive. I mean, if you just back about a year, everyone was just standstill, I guess, for everyone. Then the same summer, people start to, let's say, prepare, and then they start to move. Now it's a sense of it's unleashed. If you check the number of initiatives, the press releases on fundings, acquisitions, IPOs, it's massive. So it's like we did a quick check in March, April last year, and we were quite surprised that most of the companies are doing well. You can exclude maybe the really, really early stage in a position to get the first funding. Of course, they had a few months totally blocked from the market. But now it's open. It's like your tapping is completely open. So I would estimate this year will be super. And everyone I talk to, the companies, they are super positive. And in relationship to banks, I think if back a few years, they said no. Then they were really, really scared. And now it's open doors in communication and inviting fintechs. Okay, it's still a tricky process to get them on board if you're a young fintech, but the openness in 2 years, I think is a dramatic change. And I think the COVID has increased that pace in a few areas. If you talk about anti-money laundering, you talk about ESG, we can come back to that later on. They are seeking solutions quite actively, or very actively at the moment. So, and for Sweden, I mean, we're pretty digitalized from the beginning, so it's not a big issue to work from home or having all the setups. I think the change in behavior itself is pretty dramatic. In the way we work, you can be much more efficient in reaching out, both nationally or internationally. So it's a dramatic change, and I think this year you're going to see reports, studies, research on those effects. So I think this year will be, in many ways, best in a long time. That's my gut feeling.
Thank you so much. I also do think that we're living the best times of our lives, despite some minor changes in our behavior. Ruta, you represent a central bank. You represent the organization that has the biggest amount of data. So from your point of view, what's the situation of the fintech today, and how did the banks, the organizations that never actually could even imagine to have staff working from home, actually survive this? Did we learn something new?
Yes, of course. So like you said, I'm from central bank. I like to back all the arguments in facts, in numbers. So if we looked on the e-commerce that you mentioned, of course, the fintech helped, sustain that in both in Europe. And if we looked at Lithuanian market, the incomes from e-commerce were like second Christmas were celebrated, we could say. So all the companies said that it was like a second Christmas. So the incomes was really high. As regards banks, what we see that everything depends on flexibility of the bank. And it shows really this time how flexible are banks for adapting. So some of them who thought that it's impossible to work from home, or it's impossible to be digital, they just launch a digital platforms, and it brings us a new normal from the consumer perspective. Like we are here like in one platform from different countries. So what we see that platformization, and that Sharon has said that, more banking as a service here. Yes, so the platformization gathers all the different financial services, and what we see that companies and consumers benefit from that. From other side, what we see as a central bank, that there is a threat for cash. It's very interesting thing. 2 years ago, you never thought about that it is some kind of threat for cash, because everything we wanted to go digital for e-payments. But really what suffers most is the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable even companies who has no access to finance, who has no maybe capabilities to use digital payments. So I guess, yes, it's very great, fintech, everything, but we have always to think more broadly and how to include those who are the most vulnerable for this kind of change.
Yeah, that's the usual, statement when we speak about the innovation, the beauty of everything, etc. We tend to forget that we should actually step out at least from a major city we're sitting in, and to go to the, I don't know, to suburbs, and to actually speak to people. Are they still using the cash, or do they know how to pay with their mobile phones? When I go there, for latest 3 months, we are not allowed to leave our municipality. But before that, I still get those very interesting faces when I actually pay with my phone, because there is places where people haven't heard about it. Ruta, what is the situation with actually, and that's maybe a question for everyone, during after the pandemic, we still have a huge amount of SMEs and also private individuals that have a lack of, let's say, cash, because not in all places the state help is that fast. And I do know that, let's say, the banks, as usually, they back off from helping people, but maybe that was a huge opportunity for neobanks. But as Sharon said, some of them, they actually died, but it was a huge opportunity. What's your take on this?
So my take of this, I wouldn't, from Central, I wouldn't say that the banks didn't help. But the thing is that we are lucky what we have this fintech crowdfunding platform, P2P lending platform, who really came on time because our market was quite developed to help for SMEs to share the money. And what we see from central bank point of view, there are a lot of money at people's bank accounts. So people are really looking forward, not investing in clothes or, restaurants, like I said, what we are lacking, but they are really looking for investment to some interesting products. So from one point of view, we feel it's good because anyway, some kind of money are going to SMEs, to some kind of interesting project. From another side, it's very important for people to understand that there is risks, and then you buy a clothes, you have a clothes. Then you buy some kind of cryptocurrency, you might not have this currency by the end of the day. So this is this kind of shift. It's helping for SMEs, but both we have to monitor what's going to be in the end.
Sharon, I saw you wanted to add something on this, right?
Yeah, I know with the small and medium-sized businesses who have been struggling, at least in the UK, there was the bounce back loan scheme. And yes, some of these fintechs did try and come through, like the likes of Starling Bank and Oak North Bank as well, who have essentially tried to plug the gap from all these delays from traditional banks. So yes, they did try to step in, at least from what I can see in the UK. I know in the US there was some struggles there because, of course, there were lots of delays when it comes to the actual approval of budgets on a governmental level. So that was quite hard for others to do. And they've been trying to push the legislation to come through so that way they can give the relevant assistance. But yeah, it's been really good for central banks just across the globe and their immediate response to trying to help both small businesses and also people who have been furloughed or pretty much taken off because of coronavirus. So I can give props to central banks around, much like yourself, Ruta. I know that you would prefer a scrap, but I would like to agree with Ruta.
I mean, like here in Switzerland, I have to say what I have heard was really that the distribution of additional cash was quite well handled. So I think like administration was not like too bureaucratic, although of course like there's always like a call for more digital access, etc. But I mean, like even down to the hairdresser, I think I think there's like of course worries of like losing business or of customers like changing the habits, etc. But overall, I think I had the feeling that it weathered, or the economy, and including the SMEs, weathered it quite well here. And even like among the startups, for example, that are staying in our co-working space, I mean, they could access like the short-term work funds. So in that sense, an expensive luxury, maybe like to pay out free cash. But at least here, it seems to have worked to some extent.
Understood. Anders, is Zurich the only place where businesses and SMEs had no problems because they were instantly full of cash? What's the situation in Sweden? Actually businesses and neobanks feel very good and in a great position today?
Yeah, I talked about the fintechs. If you talk about the traditional business, SMEs, it's been a nightmare. Okay, the support programs have been awesome. Very fast from the government, going back to early 90s when we had a real crisis in Sweden. So very quickly to implement, but to transfer the capital, it's been a nightmare. It's a process that are hitting a lot of companies. But the traditional restaurants or any service companies, hotels, it's a complete nightmare because you have it here somewhere, but it takes months to get it channeled to your account. So you either have to just scrap during time, put in your private money, or just begging for that there will be a shift in service or intake incomes. So it's a big debate here in Sweden. We have made an article a year ago. I don't go into details on that, but the capital was there, but it did not reach the SMEs in general. But the bigger the companies, usually fintechs, doing super well in general, not every 100%, but in general doing really well. And I think the opportunities are bigger than ever.
That's a very interesting actually question, because even during the last week when we had this Lithuanian Fintech report and a map being presented, one of the panelists during the panel brought up a great statement when speaking about the crisis and the Fintech development overall. He said, inefficiency brings great opportunities. So if we're speaking like the capital is sitting there and it's not moving, isn't it the best place or time for the fintech to step in and to fix it? What do you think? Or there are other places that we could search for opportunities, especially this year, because we're still gonna be in lockdown, and let's be radically open here till the end of the year, and maybe we will open up a bit earlier. So where should we be searching for the opportunities this year? Who would like to start?
I mean,
Gerrit?
Yeah, okay. Sure. Maybe Ken. So I mean, like for us, I think like definitely interesting topics that where we see interest from both sides. So from our corporate partners as the accelerator, but also from the startups. It's like actually at the intersection of different industries. So for example, trying special payments for insurance, looking at alternative data to provide new types of insurances, and I think those are definitely areas where there's still a lot of potential. I think Anders also mentioned earlier, we see an increasing interest and maybe like also triggered through the crisis a bit more awareness and thoughts about like sustainability. So ESG or sustainable fintech is seeing like a strong attention. And we have also recently joined a green fintech network here in Switzerland. And on the other side, like, I mean, us dealing with both like banks and insurances. I mean, in the insurance sector, there's like even like much more still to digitalize. So they're still lagging a bit behind the financial service sector. And I think, yeah, there you can take a lot of learnings from the fintech space or from the financial service industry and like apply it to the insurance industry. And there's plenty of business opportunity to be seized.
Yeah, I honestly feel like all the insurance companies on InsurTech, they're feeling like very much stable at the moment, standing on both feet, right? Sharon, what is your opinion? Where should we be searching for inefficiency and opportunities that are lying there behind?
Oh yeah, there's definitely been quite a few inefficiencies, and as Anders mentioned before, there has been a slowdown when it comes to actually providing some of these loans, taking quite some time. And even within the fintech space itself, there were several comments in some of our articles about Starling or Oak North offering bounce back loan schemes, and people would say, well, I applied and it's been like 3 months or something. So yeah, they are still, I think, there's room for improvement there for sure. But I think actually that the regulators as well should be driving some of this innovation, because otherwise it takes a bit of a left turn and it ends up hurting the end consumer. So From what I can see, there's been a couple of instances where that's been the case, where there's been a new tech that's come in order to try and, I guess, address some inefficiencies. So for the likes of Klarna, for example, who have been trying to plug in that buy now, pay later gap in order to help people buy something that they would like now and pay it in installments. But what we've seen is that that's actually hurt quite a lot of consumers, especially because people have been put out of work without, fully knowing because of coronavirus, not fully understanding or appreciating how it works. So, for example, if you have to get a refund or something, then it's going to take a while. And by that time, Klarna would have already taken out pretty much everything that it needed from your account, and then trying to raise it to a regulator, which is what some of these people are struggling to do, was an issue because they were not fully regulated, and it wasn't really being overseen by the regulator. So there was a bit of a stumbling block there. But now there's been a report which has tried to plug that problem. So now consumers can actually take it to the financial ombudsman here, who can help and assist get those funds back, whether or not they've been used up or not. And actually try and assist the consumer moving forward. We can see that as well with Robinhood and their saga there, where they thought that they were, plugging in inefficiency where it was old school wealth tech innovation, where people can use their investments just on their phones. However, there's been an issue there because once people were actually driven to the app and were actually interested in purchasing these stocks, they were stopped and they were hindered. And there was very little regulatory oversight there. And there has been reports after reports, both in the UK, the US, and the EU, because people have complained, and there are very, very many lawsuits at this point, actually, from the likes of the American Robinhood to UK Free Trade, and also Trade 212 and all the likes of these apps. So you see as though that there's this innovation coming in, but then there's a problem. And that problem ends up hurting the end consumer, whether it be buy now, pay later, or it's an InsurTech or a wealth tech app. The end consumer gets hurt, and then that's when the regulator steps in. I think regulation should drive it further first, so that way it's not a matter of playing catch up all the time.
I'm so sorry that the time is going so fast, but Ruta, I need to hear your opinion as a regulator. Can you actually move fast and be in front of the bad happenings?
I guess that's a struggle, or the purpose we're aiming. So therefore, we created Sandbox. We are accessing the companies. But of course, I don't know, maybe it's a fate or think that regulators are always lagging behind. Maybe we are sometimes coming forward, but it takes time. And what I could say and would add on what Sharon said on inefficiency, and for others who has spoken. So I see inefficiency in one way, it's inside and compliance cost and AML and all this thing could be solved with Fintechs help. Another part, inefficiency, what we said about the product, what is proposed for our customers, and that Sharon referred, but for some customers, there is no need for this kind of buy, pay later loan. So how this kind of fintechs could predict if it's suitable or not? So I see that now in COVID times, there is more data on consumers, more data on our bank accounts balances. So one of the possibility is really using open banking role model, accessing this data, evaluating if that for customers with products is suitable, and really customizing this product. So what I see that PSD2, this open banking example, could be shifted, and really European Commission is looking, could be shifted to other spheres, like like insurance, like investments, that in order not to ask what kind of product you want, but based on your behavioral pattern, the financial institution could say, I see from your behavioral pattern that kind of products I could suggest for you in order for them to be really for you and really safe for you in terms not to spend too much money. So I see the opportunities in these fields.
Thank you so much. Anders, do you feel okay with someone actually analyzing your data and preparing a product just for you? And for example, it's so cool when you jump into the shop and you fake that you're rich, and with all the data being open, you can no longer fake because they do know how do you actually live. What's your approach towards that?
Yeah, I'm happy to see some initiatives here in Sweden that you can control your data, meaning that you can switch on and switch off the data as you please. So you have it in your control. Today, I think you have mostly in control, but you don't really know, to be honest. I don't know if I have my data where it is. If I knew that here, and I can just switch off, I don't want my data to this and that, I think that will be super relevant. I think people would love it. And we have a couple of companies working on that, if that's going to be success or not, but I really hope so, because it should be in your control. So off and on as you go. So I'm looking forward to that tremendously. Just to know where my data is, one, and then be able to switch it off from anyone.
I agree. So I mean, like in a more and more interconnected world, I mean, like differential privacy is like one of the keys to really like enable good services while still protecting the individual. Because I mean, yeah, now with data being generated everywhere, and like now also in the crisis, I think like even in Switzerland, where cash was, for example, still a preferred payment means, cards have now overtaken. So the data is there, but including all the opportunities and risks, and to be handled.
Okay, so I do agree that GDPR and European practices are very much beautiful, and we should be, let's say, like holding them and making them more, I don't know, popular. But we are only talking about the Europe here. What is happening in the world? For example, Latin America. Any opportunities there? We sometimes we even speak about the USA. What are the opportunities there? Or we shouldn't be sticking our nose there because we already saw what is happening with GameStops, etc. We have zero understanding how they operate. So let's not stick our hands there. What are your opinion on this?
I mean, mentioning the US, I mean, that's actually like an interesting example, because in the US, they are now even like partly introducing a more stricter privacy laws than in Europe. So it has become kind of an export product. And I think while it was like a risky bet maybe in the beginning, where everyone said, oh, like introducing stricter privacy laws will go out of business, I think now it rather served like as an example. And you see now in more and more areas actually this to be introduced. I think the more tricky part probably about the data privacy, also like in the payment space, but also elsewhere in tech, is more that while introduced as a kind of a Lex Google and Lex Facebook, those like big techs, they're at the same time also the ones that can handle it the best, where like for small players, it's often like much more hassle to comply with all the restrictions and still do a good job.
Okay, but we have enough sources to actually understand what is happening in USA. But can I ask you what is happening in Latin America, or let's say Africa? Africa is a huge continent. Is there a place, or are there any challenges, European neobanks, or let's say, I don't know, any solutions to be applied there? And maybe we are missing out. And this year, maybe we should be looking there. What do you think?
I mean,
yeah, Garrett, please go.
Opportunities. I think that's without question. I mean, otherwise the markets wouldn't be growing so fast. I think it's probably like always dangerous, like to come with a European or North American glasses and like and pretend to have the solution for an emerging market. So I think that's where you probably need to like relearn a lot of stuff that you have done here, and whether that's on the data side or whether that's on like the pure hardware infrastructure side.
Okay, Anders, and for example, if you would be a mentor for a startup, a neobank that would like to consider their chances on jumping in, let's say LATAM region, what would you offer them? How can they actually learn on the issues there, on how everything operates there?
Yeah, you have to be present. I mean, I just met or talked to a Brazilian fintech a few weeks ago. We talked about Klarna.
Okay. Please do share something interesting.
No. It's like we talked about Klarna. You buy now, pay later. In Brazil, everyone is paying later. It's like it's built into their culture. You buy and then you can pay. You pay when you can. So everything is pay later. So you have new solutions that is developing because of the unbanked population, etc. So for instance, schools, you have to pay for schools, and you have the parents to pay for the schools, and then they don't pay. So then they have to finance, and then you have a solution, a fintech actually financing the schools. So like a reverse. So you have those phenomena popping up in those countries. You have to understand, if you want to go there, you have to understand the behavior is completely different from our really rigid, very stiff legacy world. And they could change fast some of the policymakers and the regulators quickly. So all of a sudden in Brazil, you have PIX, this instant payment system from the central bank. They do it. And then of course, it impacts the market tremendously. And then you have to tap into, if you want to move into Brazil, then you have to tap into that local conditions that is changing super fast. We have a couple of Swedish now entering Brazil, both in open banking, also for lending solutions. So of course, it's moving enormous market. So if you're a bit brave, but again, know the conditions, there are super opportunities, but not for everyone. I mean, you have to be on a certain level. Yeah. Just talk about Africa, it varies from country to country. We've been invited from one because of the COVID. They need to jump into mobile payments. They haven't implemented it. So how do we do that? Okay, then they look at Sweden. We have Swish, our mobile payment system since 8 years. 98% of the population is using it. So how do you implement that? Okay, then you need to have the banks, the infrastructure, the cooperation from the foundation for it, and then you can put all the solutions and products on top of that. So how do you do that? They leapfrog what we have done maybe in 8 years. They might do it in less than 1 year. So of course, it's tremendous opportunity in some areas.
That's an amazing thing you just said. Like that's what I love to actually speak with the founders, because when we are fighting in this old continent, Europe, and we're trying to build something new, I said, like, guys, but the beauty is when you actually take this solution, you go to the market that don't have the legacy problems, let's say, and they can actually jump into the future so fast. And I, for example, see Africa as a huge opportunity in this case. And I even talked to a few fintechs there, and they said, like, yeah, we can jump into the front of the solutions because we don't have those legacy problems here. Do you agree with me?
I would maybe add.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, Rita. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to conclude a bit on that. I mean, I met some people from M-Pesa. Okay, and we talked about Swish. Yeah, we have done that. 10 years ago, they created a system to do mobile payments without the banking system. They are much more creative. And someone told me, I have an insight that Lagos, Nigeria is the hotspot #1 in the world when it comes to fintech. So it's happening so fast, and they have such a massive local market. So sorry to interrupt, Ruta. Go ahead.
Maybe I would want to bring to the basic, because when we talk about legacies and it's faster in this continent, but the question why it's faster, and I think the beneath reason is access to finance, inclusion. The problem there in both India, both Africa, both Latin America, inclusion and possibility to participate in financial systems. So how can we solve if our citizens are not having bank accounts? They have a simple phone, so we have to create something on what they are using. So I guess the beneath the reasons of creation and creativity is coming with a need from a market, for a consumers, for the vulnerables to be included to the financial system, especially in COVID times.
Yeah, but that's exactly what the fintech companies actually showed you. You don't need a bank account. It's enough to have a telephone number. And we do know a few examples. So if we have a country or a continent that it's not so common to have the bank accounts, why to force them? Why do they actually need this plastic card to actually prove that they can pay for something? Maybe we should also change our mindset. And if we're speaking about the inspiration and where can we actually get this, I really want to touch this topic, and I really hope you will not destroy me here. You know, lately, actually, I heard this topic in various podcasts that if it was normal for us to look for innovation in Silicon Valley, so it's no more. Today, the biggest and most interesting innovations are being born in China. Moreover, Chinese developers build an app that is a whole ecosystem on itself. And what if I tell you that on the local Chinese market, you can actually buy stuff at 80 plus years old granny, and she will take your payment by scanning a QWERTY code. Is it only me who thinks that the drama, let's say innovative drama, is moving to the east and we should be looking there? What is your opinion on this? Sharon, maybe you could say something.
I would say that the East, especially with China, they've always been at the forefront, to be honest with you. And I think the rest of these players are pretty much following what it is that they've already had for many years. If you look at, for example, WeChat or Line Pay, they've been using their phones for so long, and customers could get in touch with them so quickly just using their mobile. And as you were mentioning with the likes of M-Pesa, I think it's just a matter of understanding your market and what it is people are able to do, and then targeting that and moving forward with it. And because these innovative players such as LinePay, WeChat, Alipay, etc., understood that their market is happy to work with their phones for pretty much everything, then they just grew from that. And I think Silicon Valley actually ended up taking a slice of that cake and saying, actually, yeah, it looks like that's where we're headed. And that's why there's been such a growth in embedded finance, with so many different standard big tech players looking at payments as a service, or banking as a service as well on their phones. So now the likes of Google with Google Pay, or Amazon, maybe that might be in the future in the cards, but they're already working with Goldman Sachs as well. And there's just so many different players who are already working with banks who are in the US now, whereas that was already a thing being done in the East for a very long time. So yeah, I'd say that everyone is actually playing catch up with the East.
Garrett, anything to add?
No, I mean, like, I fully agree with Sharon also. And I mean, in the end, I think, like, also for Western countries, I think China is super interesting as an example, so that you don't have to have a Silicon Valley to, within a shorter time, like, jump ahead of the curve. Of course, I mean, like, partly size helps on some of the topics, like supercomputing, etc. But on the other side, it's also like an example, like maybe hard to replicate, but with a centralized government giving like really like a strong push in investing and defining like really long-term plans, investing and building cities that are completely focused on business. I think that's maybe something harder, but even like to see how like a very dedicated leadership on a political level can actually leapfrog from a follower position into a leader position. And I think there's probably more to learn, but I'm not a China expert, so have little depth on that.
Okay, but let's ask an opinion of a policymaker, Representative Ruta. China and politics, is it an issue? Because it's a huge amount of capital there, and it can be moving to Europe towards USA. And with fintech, it's relatively easy for it to start moving. So what is your approach towards that? I know it's a difficult question, but maybe.
Yes, because I wanted to talk maybe more about innovation, and maybe just to
okay, just briefly, and then about the innovation.
Yeah. So mainly innovation in China. China is a good example, of having the target for innovation. Before, the biggest target was really GDP, growing GDP, and GDP is no innovation in there. Then they have these KPIs for creating R&D for techs. So there was the really shift. Of course, centralized governance is very possible, but really it's very about the strategy. And I bring an example of Lithuania that 4 years ago, it was a matter of strategy to go forward with fintech. So I guess each of the country is possible to take advantage. And I am referring to Italy, that recently has a new prime minister who said fintech is our goal, because Italy is really in a very final place as regards digitalization in European Union. So I guess it's about the strategy and the goals. As coming to your question that is very difficult, I'm not an expert on geopolitics, and like a central banking, we are neutral, we are not referring to that. Capitals are everywhere, but in Europe, we have also a lot of capital that nowadays has to be used. So I guess we have to benefit from what we have here now. And of course, thinking about other investment, not only excluding China, but other continents that really creating some kind of value.
Okay, thank you for an honest answer. And I just got a message from our organizers of the event that we do have questions that I should also be airing. Sharon, I have a question for you. And actually, it is a question that I was preparing for all of the panelists. So, but let's start with you. Yekaterina Govina is asking, it seems we're living in a period of crypto renaissance or rebirth. How do you explain that, and how do you see it in the future? So speaking about the trends, we can't miss the crypto world. Is the fight with the legacy system still happening? And is there anyone winning?
Well, with crypto, it's a bit of a volatile market, in all honesty. It goes up quite high, as we've seen in the last few weeks, and it also goes right back down. So with the likes of Elon Musk, for example, who's put quite a lot into Bitcoin, it's then shot up. But at the same time, there are people who are then shorting Tesla and who have seen that the investment in Bitcoin will actually hurt Tesla in turn, because some investors don't think that it's a viable source of looking at assets. So I personally think that it's not really more of a crypto renaissance or birth. I mean, there's so many that are being rolled out on a daily. I feel like they grow within each and every day. We've seen Dogecoin. There's the likes of one that I came across yesterday that's essentially tied to GIFs. There's ones that are tied to Pepe the Frog. I mean, there's a lot of different weird things going on there. And I my part is probably with the regulators. That's honestly where my leanings always lie. And we've seen in America that they've cracked down on some of these XRPs, for example, which aren't being used or distributed in some platforms because they've ruled them as a securities. So yeah, I would probably not hold my breath because I think it's mainly based off hype, as we've seen. If one person who is into the market like Elon Musk can drive up the price, then it doesn't really seem like it's a valid asset in that sense, because it just dips right back down when the interest drops. So
at least no currency. So
yeah, it's a hype train, to be honest. That's how I view it.
Garrett, I was expecting you to have a different approach towards that. Tell me, how many Bitcoins do you personally own at the moment?
Oh, I would say I'm rather a virgin, like when it comes to cryptocurrencies. I mean, like partly also coming originally from banking. I mean, I've learned early on like that you have to invest in stuff that you understand. And I mean, like maybe like technically, I've also like was one of the previous fintechs that I was involved in. Like I've looked a bit into it, but I think like when it comes then to like what drives value. I think I don't understand it well enough to invest really like serious money. So of course I'm like having like small bits like to stay connected, and also like if you work in fintech and us also like having partners in the DLT space, of course, I mean you have to stay close enough. But I think there's as Sharon said, definitely some hype. At the same time, I would also clearly distinguish, I mean, like the digital ledger as a technical concept, which has like a lot of like potential on some areas. Not that it's the only one, but it's one potential solution. And I mean, like we're seeing here definitely like on the tokenization of assets, some good approaches. Also here in Switzerland, even like SIX, the stock exchange operators, is quite heavily investing into that, and some others. And yeah, at the same time, yeah, you need to probably be aware that it's not happening in a day, and wherever there's a hype and like a lot of, I would say, religious believers, it's sometimes hard to have like a very fact-based discussion. And I think that's something that is maybe now getting a chance, like after the first big hypes, but it still needs a lot of work.
Thank you so much, Anders. Stepping away from the coins itself, the idea of decentralization, let's call it like this. What is your opinion towards that?
Well, I'm getting old, so this no, it's a lot to happen, and I visited the event last Monday. So you finally see some, let's say, business model built on blockchain or tokenizations, insurance or communities, etc. So what that will do is you build up a system complete outside the banking system. So that will be pretty exciting. What will happen? I have some clues, but to be honest, it's very, very dynamic area. Expectations were there a few years ago and then was a bit stopped, at least in Sweden. But now you see more of those attempts built on top of the blockchain. So in Sweden, most companies, they don't say they are a blockchain company because you just mix things up. So they say they're built on that technology. Yeah. But I'm sure it will happen so many things we cannot imagine. But if it's 1 year or 5 years or beyond that, I don't know. It would be really exciting.
Maybe like one point to add. I mean, like, because I think in a lot of other fintech areas or fields, you had early on, like there was a lot of discussion about disruption, and then over time it became more a discussion about collaboration. And nowadays, I think like everyone is living peacefully with each other and just doing business. And I think like in the crypto space, you have still a lot of like this discussion. Okay, we want to completely replace and want to build like a parallel system where no one tracks me, etc. And I think thereby you're polarizing, of course, a lot, and you're increasing the resistance of the incumbents like to adopt you, or also the regulators to be able like to accept you. And I think probably the truth or like the final state is a bit closer like to the legacy systems, but using the technical advantages, but not trying to really like have non-text, non-regulated, non-traced shadow system. I think that's, for me, still something like where once that's happening, then you have a good chance like to really roll it out in large scale.
Understood. Okay, let's not focus that much on the crypto or let's say like the decentralization. Today, we also speak about the trends and opportunities. And as I mentioned before, inefficiency and some, let's say, challenges usually bring us to the amazing opportunities. And can we briefly speak about the cybersecurity in fintech? Is it actually a problem? Do we have a problem there? And is it only connected with EML, or cybersecurity per se is a huge opportunity that fintech could tackle? What are your thoughts on this? Sharon, maybe you could start.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw it last year with the investigation that unraveled such massive money laundering and fraud that's been going on for quite a few years from the incumbents. And yeah, I do think that this is a space that perhaps we need more innovation when it comes to how we conduct compliance and anti-money laundering checks for sure. And there has been actually a rise in, both investment and also partnerships and opportunities with some of these reg tech firms, what they're often known as. But yeah, there has been a growing rise of cyber attacks, as I mentioned earlier on, but also with money laundering, with the massive investigation that was released last September. So I can only hope that this is a space that regulators can really push forward and drive some change as well when it comes to some of these reg techs and the innovation that they have to offer, because there are some neobanks as well who are struggling with their own compliance too in this space. I mean, I don't want to name names, but there are certainly plenty of comments that we get.
You can mention them. We always send the invoices right after the event. It's all good. It's all good. We have an amazing package for this. Garrett, Switzerland is the country that is well known by the transparency in the banking system. So cyber security, RegTech, and GovTech. What is happening there? Are there many opportunities?
I would say definitely. And I mean, for me, it's like a general topic again, like coming back to the interconnectedness and like, I mean, anything that's software driven and is like globally connected. I mean, of course, scales much better, and that applies like for the opportunities, but also for the threats. And for me, also like this, it actually has two sides of the medal, like when you talk about anti-money laundering and digital. So I would say while it's now much faster, like to move cash, and especially like if you remove a lot of like this batch processing that in the past was making it so slow and expensive, I mean, also the anti-money laundering will be faster. And I think the challenge is, of course, that the political systems are not evolving in such a fast pace, like to keep up with the potential of technology to abuse. So I mean, we are seeing definitely, for example, in our news batch that we just started here in our accelerator, that there's a strong share of security-related companies. So banks are definitely having it top of mind, and I think that applies, for the financial part, but even for the collaboration part. I mean, with everyone working from home office, I mean, you need to completely rethink how you wall your business, and I think that we see on all ends.
Thank you so much, Anders. Do you have something to add in the same topic?
Big area. I had to check with one of the leading fintechs we have in Sweden in the anti-money laundering space. He said the cost is about $150 to $200 billion per year, increasing 10 to 15% per year. So that itself implies it's a massive area to improve. I talked to a bank last year. They said they can employ 1,000 people directly if they knew they can have 100% control of anti-money laundering. They have a 1,000 IT systems to coordinate and check. So it's a massive challenge for them to maneuver, and super scared to get the fee, because if they have a fee, it's $1 billion in that level. So it's a massive area, increasingly important. Maybe the policy is in there, but now you have to show your efficiency in detail. But it's not easy business for young fintech. Hey, we have a solution for you. But the area is a global big issue, of course.
Maybe.
Yes, Garrett, yes.
So maybe like one topic that is also like interesting, like in regards to the anti-money laundering and fintech. I mean, it's paradox that like where, for example, the cryptocurrencies originally like have also been like launched a bit like and like somewhere in the gray or darker space where it was seen as a welcome opportunity to move cash without actually being questioned. Yet at the same time, like with a end-to-end connected public ledger, I mean, it's actually the perfect world for any regulator for anti-money laundering. You just need to make sure that only identified wallets are able to transact. And so I think that's where it's started maybe with a complete opposite intention. It could be also at the same time the solution.
I would love to continue our discussion and invite someone from the dark net, because I do have a feeling we would open up absolutely new layers. Ruta, you represent the central bank, and how do you tackle these compliance issues? And maybe you could briefly say about the newest initiative of the Bank of Lithuania.
Okay, so what we have and what we feel that, like you mentioned, GovTech, RegTech, is some initiatives that helps for companies to comply more efficiently. And what we invite really to have a cooperation to work on this. Bank of Lithuania has created from AML part of dedicated AML center that would really gather everyone under one table to discuss what kind of risk we have and how can we tackle, how can we have this cooperation between banks and different players, because every bank every day has to do the same KYC of the same person, and the person comes to one bank, he has to do the same thing to another, and maybe this kind of procedures could be united. It's one topic. Another topic, I guess it's very important to talk about how really this kind of compliance cost could be not so burdensome for a banks. From Bank of Lithuania perspective, what we are initiating and what we're doing is really enabling to gather all the data ourselves from the banks, not for them, to put in reports. I talk about the data of transactional data. It could be financial data. So we are thinking about possibilities how to gather the data in not so costly ways. And another point is really to working with banks and fintech companies, or not fintech, IT companies who could help, and RegTech solution who will help this compliance burden. Because by the end of the day, when you say AML, cybersecurity, is it a problem? I think it's new normal. Then all the cash management comes to digital world, it becomes visible. So AML and compliance, it's a normal thing, and you have to do this. Just we have to find some ways to do this more efficiently, more united in this field.
Yeah, and in this case, let's not talk on what was happening before with cash, right? Because when we have everything online, at least we can trace something, and to understand what was happening. Dear panelists, we are moving so fast today, and I have like 9 more questions. I'm so sorry we cannot tackle them because it's such an interesting topic and there's so many layers. I have a question from the audience and I really want to read it loud. Hello, I'm from Georgia, where I just started implementing PSD2 for open banking. What opportunities and threats you see for traditional banks and also for startups in emerging markets from the perspective of the Western world? Thank you. Who would like to jump on this?
I could start, and I guess from emerging market, because we work with North Macedonia, other countries, Ukraine for PSD2. So what we bring, and especially what is most important, is cooperation, and to have someone as a shareholder who would represent this third-party providers, with fintech companies, in order to create some kind of ecosystem that would be consumer-friendly. Because by the end of the day, it's not about IT solution. It is maybe, but it's really how to make that consumer would use the solution, how to make that it would use payment initiation services, account information services. So what we learn, that in the beginning, it's very important for some kind of mediator, central bank, to step in and to balance all the expectations. Another thing from our banking society, what we saw that in the beginning they were against open banking, but now they are using and acting as one of the providers, third-party providers, who is also providing payment initiation services. So it's a big opportunity, but it has to be managed properly.
Okay, thank you so much. And since we're very much at the end, I really want everyone who is listening to us to leave this discussion with something in their something actual or something valuable in their hands. So, dear panelists, can I ask you to mention your top predictions or trends for this year, or maybe just to wrap up our discussion and to mention some specific opportunities that each and every founder or a company that is investigating the fintech world should actually look at. Sharon, can I start with you? You're smiling so much. I really want to ask you first.
Sure. So within this space, as I did mention before, there is like banking as a service that's quite huge, and embedded finance that's quite huge, e-commerce as well. But there's also a rise of initial public offerings, and especially using special purpose acquisition companies, SPACs. So yeah, I think we're just going to continue seeing the growth of the use of SPACs and we can probably keep an eye out on whatever ramifications those have in the future as well, from either a regulatory perspective or a compliance perspective as well, and the risks as well that might entail in the future is probably something that should be on people's radars too. There's also growth in M&A as always, despite there being the turmoil that we faced last year and even the lead up to this year. There still is a growth in mergers and acquisitions. There's also a rise as well in so many fundraisings that have taken place. We can't even report on all of them. We had to come up with a new way of, just in case you missed it, which is a new thing that we do on Friday, just to wrap up all of the little investments that have been taking place, because there's been quite a lot of investment this year. So yeah, it does look promising. It's a good start, and I would just say to keep your eyes peeled on any sort of risks that might come about from the next few years.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Anders, can I turn to you now?
Yeah, we're talking on the broad picture. I mean, we talked about Klarna earlier. I just read an article. They're doing $1 billion funding, IPO. That would, of course, create a spillover in terms of capital for people involved early in Klarna. There's another one also doing IPO, so that's one track. I see or expect some kind of acquisition. Some of the fast-growing fintechs, they acquire market positions in other continents or countries for sure. If you talk about fintechs in space, it's data-driven. So if you can find that, it's two areas. One is the ESG data. Sustainability is a hot issue everywhere. If they can find solution there, they are scouting. Yeah, at least here, very active. And then you talk about smooth payments. I'm looking for smooth lending and smooth financing, microfinancing. So that's also some initiative coming up. So that space, I think, will happen a lot. Those two areas. On the top level, you have all those IPO and acquisition stuff.
Thank you so much, Garrett.
Yeah, thanks. I think like after you started with a good advertisement for Lithuania, I will finish with a.
Sorry, I was born like this.
No, I think like for me it would be quite important also to mention. I mean, I think Switzerland has been like initially a bit lagging behind, like with open banking, but it's quickly catching up now. So there's like also like initiatives that, for example, tackle wealth now. So Open Wealth Alliance just been founded. So I think anyone like who's looking beyond the pure payment related use cases, I think is in a good spot in Switzerland. And something that I've also learned last year from one of the startups that participated in our programs was actually that the Swiss Fintech license seems to be quite an attractive one in terms of that you're fully operational or fully capable of doing business, where in a lot of like neighboring countries, the Fintech licenses have quite more restrictions. So please get in touch. Like if you want to know more, and happy to welcome you here if you're not already in Lithuania.
So Garrett, that was the opportunities and the trends you see for 2021. Am I correct?
Definitely. And ESG, Anders mentioned already, and I think that was definitely where Switzerland or the Swiss government last year announced that they want to take the global leadership. So there will be some investment and a lot of support from different areas. So I would say any fintech working in that space definitely has a good chance to get a strong support network here. So
okay, Garrett, and can I ask you to give me one more favor? And you will be the only one I will ask this. Could you write a short post or article on LinkedIn with the answer to the question? What would be your personal advice for foreign fintechs entering the Swiss market? Okay. And I know like 5 companies that would actually address you with this question, because the only thing that we lack in European Union, we have zero understanding on how to operate with Swiss people.
Yeah,
it's like if you don't have $1 billion in your account, they're not interested. But there should be another way, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Okay.
Can you promise an answer to this question?
Happy to do.
Okay, amazing. And Ruta, what would be your favorite, or let's say what would be your take on what are the opportunities everyone should actually pursue this year?
Okay, so everyone talked in detail, so I am going from the customer side. Just think about customer in this world, COVID, at home. What we really need is accessibility to all the financial services. And I would say go with the 3S. It's smooth, safe, sustainable. It's some kind of product that is customer authentic. And on this point of view, I guess it's data-driven lending, investment, all this kind of services fall in this 3S and customer authentic perspective.
Thank you so much, Ruta, and thank you so much, everyone, for an amazing, inspiring, thoughtful, and honestly, a very interesting discussion we have created today. From the whole Rocket team, we thank you. We thank each and everyone who participated today, for everyone who watched us today, and for everyone who asked a question today. Thank you again, Anders, Ruta, Sharon, Gerrit. It was a pleasure to have a too short discussion with you. I'm pretty sure each and everyone who asked a question and we didn't have time to answer, they can approach you on LinkedIn and ask a personal question. Maybe you will follow my advice as I asked Gerrit to write a short post on this. Maybe it's a broader question for a wider audience. And I would like to thank you again, everyone. And I really much want to see you on our event. So stay tuned for more information. Don't forget to subscribe to the events on rocketvilnius.com. Thank you again. I was Andrius Milnavičius, and I wish you an amazing evening.